Hey folks, Greg Sherman, Mr. Bowtie 1982 on Twitter. Welcome into our second round preview of the Texas High School Girls Basketball Tournament. 384 games down. We still have a long way to go to determine who's going to be at the Dome in a couple of weeks and who's got a chance at winning a state championship. As always, bring in our great expert, Joe Lombard, who has 19 state championships as a head coach, 20th as an assistant. Joe, we have a historic moment that'll be coming up in a few moments. We'll tell the viewers about that in a second. But first off, Joe, not a lot of upsets happened in the first round. We did have an unbeaten go down with Karnes City pulling off a stunner over Columbus in Class 3A, and Katie Tompkins went to overtime in 6A. But Joe, other than that, it was really status quo where there weren't a ton of monumental upsets in the first round.
I tried to check most of the teams that are ranked. There weren't very, like you said, hardly any upsets, but that's to be expected. And not to say that couldn't happen. And like you said, there was an undefeated team got beat. I think Columbus got beat, but things are picking up. So round two will be more competitive, and there's a couple really good matchups up here in Region 1. I think will be interesting to watch.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And as always, we remind the folks that we're going to go today. We're going to start with 5A, then go to 6A, and then we'll go down. We'd love to have you stay on for the entire time. But if you want to fast forward to the classification or classifications that interest you, look at the title description below, and you'll be able to find the classifications that you might have interest in. But before we get into the classifications and our historical moment, Joe, I want to mention, I just got the book from you in the mail. It's called More Than a Coach. There's a it's a great book. I have not had a chance to read. And Joe, I want to give you just a moment to plug the book.
Well, hey, I didn't know I'd ever write a book, but just had quite a few people ask me about a lot of things that I did put in the book, and I did it for a couple reasons. I wanted to give back, and so that book is for coaches, especially young coaches. Hopefully there's a lot of little things that might can help them, but I wanted to honor our players also. And so all those teams I coached for 42 years, that's in the book. And then I wanted people to understand that coaching, and Coach Ott's going to be on here in just a minute. Hey, it's not, there's a lot of frustration and disappointment, a lot of stuff that go on that you have to learn how to deal with. And so we try to really point that out in the book. There were a lot of tough losses, and there was a lot of, what am I doing? I need to do a better job. And and then coaching can be all consuming sometimes, where you got to have your life priorities in order. And so I just wanted to share some of that stuff, and hopefully some people can, it's a great read. We have a writer named John Mark Ballou, who's our sports editor in Amarillo for 35 years. He wrote the book, but then it's also one that people hopefully can get some encouragement from too. So thanks for plugging that. All the proceeds, I'm not making any money off this thing. All the proceeds go to it's called Tatum Tough Foundation. Tatum was a daughter of our boys basketball coach, Travis Schulte, who passed away just a couple of years ago, had cancer and passed away around the age of 8. And so that was a heartbreaking thing there. And so they have a foundation that helps people that have kids that have cancer. And so I think it's got a good cause to it.
Yeah, absolutely. It'd be great to finally get a chance to read this. There's two things I want to point out. Number one, it says 19 state championships on there. You're going to have to X that out and put a 20 on there. You may have to X it out again to go to 21.
I don't know if you count that volunteer assistant thing.
We'll figure that out. By the way, I want to point out one other thing real quick. This is the back of the book. This is Joe from back in the day. I don't know if you can see it there. And Joe, I won't spend a ton of time on this, but when I saw that, I couldn't tell if that was you or if that was when Dana Carvey used to do George Bush Sr. on Saturday Night Live. That looks just like him, and I'm waiting to see if you were really doing Dana if it was you and not Dana Carvey doing the church lady and George Bush on Saturday Night Live.
Could have been, but I thought you were going to say that's either Clint Eastwood or Brad Pitt. So,
Uh,
okay, I'll take Dana then. That'd be
Speaking
okay.
of things that are disappointing that you just talked about, we're gonna have to do that. But seriously, folks, make sure you pick up that book. Look for it in your local media outlet or look for it online. Well, Joe kind of spoiled a little bit that we were mentioning. This is we have a historical moment. We have a guest. Somebody wants to be on our Zoom podcast. I have no idea why, Joe. You got to take a charge shirt on. We'll ask about that later on. But yes, somebody is crazy enough to want to be on our episode previewing round number 2, and it's somebody else who's trying to defend a state championship. It is the head coach of Cedar Park. That is Donny Ott, who is trying to finish off an undefeated season. Went through the first round. They're the state champions from last year. We'll have Donny unmute himself. And Donny, I was going to say congratulations on the great start. And why in the world do you want to give up your sanity to come here? I mean, thanks for joining us.
Well, listen, a couple things. First off, I enjoy listening to you, your wit, your humor, your coverage of the sports and what you do for this area and for the San Antonio area and girls basketball is just phenomenal. I really appreciate it. I've always enjoyed listening to it. And then, obviously having a chance to visit with Joe in any capacity is just an honor, a huge honor. I mean, I, had the chance a few months ago when we were in Texas Tech at a clinic to get a chance to visit with him. And, I heard you talking about his book. And one of the things he said was how he wants to give back. And that's the one thing that's always amazed me about Joe. And is just his humility and the fact that he's willing to talk and share the game. And with all he's accomplished, willing to still share and grow and learn. I mean, I'm sitting there watching him take notes at the clinic, and I'm thinking this is remarkable, and so I appreciate both of you a lot, and it's a huge honor to be on here to act like I know what I'm talking about in girls basketball. So,
yeah,
well, it's good to have you on, Donny. We'll have fun.
I think I think you know a thing or two on the winning the state championship last year. Now, I want to ask you briefly, first off, we know the Austin area is growing, especially the Leander, Georgetown, Liberty Hill, that area north of Austin. We've seen it grow in football, not just Austin Westlake, but the entire area. Girls soccer won a state championship last year with Dripping Springs on the southwest side of Austin. It had been, I think, 8-9 years since the Austin area won a girls basketball title. Last one was Rhonda Farney at Georgetown. Have you noticed any sort of a change with how girls basketball is in the Austin area, or how do you what have you noticed, Donny?
Well, it was a real big boost for our school district. Leander ISD has 6 high schools, and we've never won a state championship in any basketball, girls or boys. So, it was a big boost to our school district and our community. And, I do feel like there's been some growth in the Austin area. Rhonda is a pillar in this area, and she's one of the most remarkable people to talk to and visit with. And she's, really, in all honesty, motivated me when I first got here because they were in our district. And, I always knew that we had to be prepared to play them. And so you've got coaches like that around this area that, are getting a wave of kids right now that are pretty good. And we're getting some trainers around the area, skill trainers and stuff that are being active in their development. And, it's been really good to see the growth of the Austin area for sure.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see what happens. And again, folks, we will break down the classification. So again, if you want to zip ahead to the classification that interests you the most, check out the description below. But again, we hope you'll join us for all of them. Real fast, I was talking to Joe before we started. Speaking of Rhonda Farney, 27-15, they beat Bernie Champion in the first round. It was 8-4 at halftime. It kind of felt like that Wall State Championship game from a few years ago that was 24-20. The 27 points that Georgetown scored was the second fewest among the 384 winning teams. One of the other teams in another part of the state had 24. We had a minor upset here with San Antonio Johnson beating Wagner in 6A. We'll get to that in our 6A segment. Johnson gave up 72 points, which was the most by 10 of any of the winning teams. So Region 4 with some of those quirks. Well, we're going to start off with Class 5A. Obviously, Cedar Park unbeaten, nationally ranked, trying to defend the championship. Not necessarily a big, a tough game in round number 1, winning by 50. But, Donny, I want to ask you, and Joe obviously chime in, those first-round games, have to scare the teams that are the contenders, the ones that have a chance at winning a title, just because you never know what that underdog's going to do coming out of the 4th spot of their respective district. And there's that old saying that you can't win a state championship in the first round, but you can definitely lose it.
agree. I'm watching around this area. You look at that first round game, Marble Falls was a 4 seed, and they go in and lose at the buzzer, to Canyon, a very good 1 seed. And then I turn around, I see Round Rock McNeil, they're the 3rd seed, and they just beat Westlake last night, the 2 seeds. So those first round games can be tricky, especially with those teams that are playing with house money, that they maybe have never made the playoffs in a while and they're real hungry, or maybe you got a good group of seniors that you've been kind of waiting on for that year. So we talked in detail to our kids about staying in the moment and making sure that we respect all of our opponents and know that we're beatable any night.
Joe, you want to chime in also?
Yeah, well, upsets, that's what makes basketball a great game. I mean, it's fun to watch and pull for the underdog and let there be an upset that creates noise across the state. So, yeah, it's always possible. But like I said earlier, I think you're going to see more upsets here in the 2nd round, 3rd round. You're going to, there's going to be some heavy favorites that don't make it just because it's so easy to have it. You can have an off night and play against somebody that's really hot. So, yeah, when it's do or die every game, it's not a 4 out of 7 series like the NBA stuff. So things can happen. You can have somebody sprain an ankle or foul trouble or, those kind of things.
Yeah,
Well,
and you mentioned
matchup based too, like you can draw a bad matchup just, personnel wise. So.
Yeah, and you mentioned those buzzer beaters. We had a few across the state. We had a couple here in San Antonio. San Antonio Edison, who will draw Cedar Park in the 2nd round. They got one at the buzzer. Chasey Getz of New Braunfels Canyon hit one at the buzzer. Other teams, for the most part, were able to take care of their business, so to speak. I know Cedar Park won by 50. The Austin area is kind of interesting in that it's split with Region 3 and Region 4, where Pflugerville, Hendrickson, Pflugerville ISD, they're in Region number 3. And Pflugerville, Hendrickson, a team that made a long run, I think, last year, and a team that could very easily make a long run this year. I mean, region with 5A, we always talk often about Region 1, where the Panhandle is, where the Frisco ISDs are. They had 2 highly ranked teams in Liberty, who's been in the finals the last 2 years, winning it once, and Memorial. But a lot of people do forget about this part of the state. You mentioned Rhonda Farney at Georgetown. You mentioned, obviously, yourself at Cedar Park, and it almost kind of feels like Region 4, you forget about it when you get away from Region 1.
Yeah, we were in Region 3 my first 2 years here, so I can attest to the strength in Region 3. We lost in the regional finals to College Station that year. They lost to Liberty in the championship or the state game. So, the region's really tough. And this year you alluded to a couple, Henderson and Pflugerville with April, over there. She does a phenomenal job. Sorry about the passing period music. You can hear it.
Donnie's coming in. You thought he'd be scared. He's Joe. You got to be taking a charge because he's bringing his own music. He's bringing his own stuff in. I mean, it'll be the Donny Ott show by the time we're done with all this.
He's got no stress. He's feeling good right now.
Donnie, please continue though.
I don't want y'all to have to hear that. So, but it's our passing period.
Yeah, I guess at Cedar Park they bring all their stuff, and while we wait for Donny Ott's music to slow down, Joe, not really a lot of big stuff in the 1st round, at least up there in Region 1. I mean, it looks like everybody kind of took care of their business, some close games, some blowout games. Anything stand out in 5A across any of the regions that you noticed?
Well, I'm real familiar with Region 1 as far as the 5A stuff because we used to be in that region with those guys and that district with some of those teams. And we've played some of the best teams this year. And there's some really good, I think Emerald High and Lubbock Cooper are really 2 really good 5A teams. That Emerald High, very athletic, and Cooper, a great shooting team. And I think those guys can make some noise. I don't know if you can ever discount Timberview. I mean, they're probably coming on a little bit, and Timberview may be in the Region 1 thing up here. And of course, in the Region 2, Coach has already mentioned the Frisco teams, but the Frisco teams are, you'll have to go through those to get through Region 2. McKinney North looks like they've got a good team this year, probably very athletic. And so it's going to be interesting as we move along through this thing and everybody starts playing each other, and sometimes those regional quarterfinal games are like state championship games, that third round. And then of course, once you get to the regionals, you play those 2 games back to back. That can be a tough sometimes, if something happens. We had a girl tore an ACL one time in a regional tournament. And so you're feeling pretty good about things, and all of a sudden it's a little different team. So, like Coach Ott said, there's going to be a 5A thing. He's not going to be favored, but there's going to be people out there that think they can win as well. So, on a given night, Cedar Park needs to be ready to go.
I agree, Joe. I mean, we most certainly do. I look at this game right now we have with coming up. I mean, Edison, they're scrappy as all get out, and they get after it. And their transition game is fun to watch, and they shoot those threes like crazy. And so, we're going to have to play well this game. And it just is one of those in the playoffs that matchups matter, and we've got to find ways to make sure we can counter those things.
And yeah, definitely. It'll be really interesting to see how those goes. McKinney North will get one of those Frisco Powers. I'm going to try to punch up my bracket real quick while I'm waiting for Donny Ott to take his requests. McKinney North actually would not, in the third round, if the bracket were to hold, they would get Frisco Liberty, which, we'll talk more when we get to the third round next week, how that third round is really when the tournament begins. And I want to ask you, Donny, we mentioned Georgetown only getting 27 last night, 27-15, and ended up 8-4 the African Spurney champion. When you're a coach like that, do you go back and say what went wrong, or is it, is it survive and advance?
Hey, listen, Barney does a phenomenal job in that 1-3-1. So I'm not surprised to see it low scoring. I mean, you got to be really good to score against her zone. She extends it out. They play hard. They got a big 6'3", 6'4" kid in the middle that block shots so they can take chances and allow things to funnel to the middle. And heck, our score was 8-6 at the end of the first quarter. So 8-4. Wasn't overwhelmingly surprising at half, to be honest. Rhonda keeps those games low scoring. That's what she's always done. She prides herself with their defensive end, and Champion just didn't hit shots. They got a good sized post inside that did some work, but they just didn't hit shots. And you got to be able to hit shots against the zone. And as Joe can tell you, if you don't hit shots against the zone, you better be a good offensive rebounding team, or else it's going to be a long night.
Yeah. I think in girls basketball, I still think defense can dominate. Most teams, maybe not Cedar Park, but most teams, the defense is a little stronger than the offense. And so when you have 2 really good teams come together, a lot of times girls teams, that's going to be a low scoring game. And I got the fortune or misfortune to play a lot of those early in my career with Leveland and some of those type teams. And the scores would be in the 20s. And then you don't want to take a bad shot because there's not very many possessions. And so it's a grind out, nerve wracking game. Can't say I ever enjoyed that stuff. But you're one possession away from either winning or losing a thing. And every possession is crucial. We couldn't, if you can't turn somebody over and they can hold the ball, it's without the shot clock, it can be a tough game to win sometimes. And so I was early in my career, I was in a lot of those games. And so I think those are when you're only down by 2, a 3-point shot or something may win the game, and you feel like you're down 10, but you're down 2. And so something magical can happen. So those Coach Farney, she's from the old school. She's used to that. But yeah, been a lot of those.
Her second round game should be a fun test. Medina Valley, they're not bad at all. They got some really good seniors. You know, they play hard. They got a really nice big. They got a couple good perimeter players. You know, so I'm and they've got three really, you know, good seniors that play a lot of minutes for them. You know, and Morales is a key player for them. She's a good guard, and they got a big inside. So I expect that to be a good matchup. But you know, like Rhonda, I mean, when we played them in district, you know, we're averaging close to 60 a game, and 44-41 was our first game. You know, 50 to 24. You know, so I mean, almost, you know, 10 to 15 points below our average. And that's just, like I said, a testament to what they do there. I mean, she is defensive minded, and they're tough.
Yeah, definitely. The second round matchups, Cedar Park will take on San Antonio Edison. Potentially could see New Braunfels Canyon in a third round rematch from last year. By the way, I did look it up. Thomas Edison, who the school is named after, he officially is credited with 1,093 patents throughout his entire career. I don't know if any of those patents involve how to be able to beat a runaway unbeaten team in Cedar Park, but I guarantee you this much. It wouldn't surprise me if maybe they go back to Menlo Park, New Jersey, and see if Thomas Alva Edison if he invented a way to beat Cedar Park, and if they do, that will certainly be a fun thing to look at. Well, we move on from 5A. We'll go up to 6A, and Donny Ott will graciously stay with us. And not much happened in 6A as far as upsets. Austin Westlake lost to Round Rock McNeil. I know Westlake's radio announcer real well. They're a really young team, a lot different than the team that lost an 11-point lead in the state quarters a couple of seasons ago. Katie Tompkins won in overtime. It was a near upset, by the way, thanks to Nick Alvarado, Texas HS girls basketball. For those notes, the rest of the stuff went about the way you would kind of expect. And Donny, I'll start with you, because what people may not know is when you were putting your shirt on before we started, you've got that T-shirt on, and underneath that, people can't see, the T-shirt says, "I beat Duncanville," and he's a member of the exclusive club. They beat Duncanville in non-district, and I know beating Duncanville, there's a big difference beating them in November or December versus in a pre-district tournament versus now. But how did that springboard Cedar Park briefly, and can you take anything out of that, either you guys winning or Duncanville losing, or is it just it's a pre-district tournament, move on to the next game?
Oh no, you know, we that's a staple win for our program, as long as, you know, we're going to be here, because the meaning of that, it was in the beautiful classic, which Vicki Benson puts on, an unbelievable tournament just filled with loaded talent. I mean, Austin High was in there, Pflugerville, Duncanville, us, Hardin Jefferson. I mean, it was just a loaded tournament. And you know, Duncanville, I mean, it was just a full court, 94 feet, you know, everywhere. It felt like you were playing 5-on-7 the whole game. And I'm just really proud of our kids and how they executed some of our offensive sets and just initiators to kind of free up some of the pressure. And you know, we made free throws down the stretch, which was huge for us. So, you know, I'm really excited that game was on our schedule and it played out that way. You know, because when you're in a tournament, you don't know if you're going to get a play in a championship game against a team like Duncanville, and so it was a huge game for us, and such an unbelievable environment. Central Texas, I mean, there's a lot of people from around the area just wanted to come to watch it. So very proud of our program for that win, for sure. But I can tell you, Duncanville is going to be, they'll be there in the end somehow. I mean, them and DeSoto, there's going to be, I'd like to be a fly on the wall to watch it, honestly.
You know, if you make it to the state semis, you don't have to be a fly on the wall, or you can always buy a ticket, I guess, if you want to do that. But Joe, briefly on 6A, we won't gloss through all the results. DeSoto won by 58, Duncanville won by 30. Everybody took care of business. But one of the things I do want to mention is down here we had what I would call a moderate upset, not a monumental one. I was at San Antonio Johnson versus Wagner and Brandeis versus Judson, the doubleheader they had here. Johnson beat Wagner 79-72. It was the most points allowed by any of the teams that won a first-round game, the 72 that they allowed. But it was Johnson's first playoff win in 4 years, first versus San Antonio in 5. Wagner's stout freshman, L.A. Sneed, had 39. She got into foul trouble early, but she will she'll definitely be a good one. Then Brandeis in a game that I thought was going to be a 50-50 with Judson's Amira Mabry, the last player from the Judson State Championship team, going up against Ryan Forrester. And it was not even close. 8-0 runs by Brandeis to start both halves. It was 19 points at one point, and Brandeis went on to win. And Joe, you've been doing this for a while, but we had something happen that had never happened before, and that is Judson and Wagner losing in the first round in the same year for the first time ever. And Cibolo Steele held off San Antonio Reagan in 41-40 on Tuesday night, what was a classic themselves. And so that 28-6A, we talk about Clark and Reagan. Reagan goes out in the first round. Clark wins. The back end of that district, though, won. So maybe we're seeing a little shift in San Antonio basketball potentially.
Yeah, could be. That would have been a heck of a game to watch, that Johnson-Wagner game,
79-72.
Wow. That goes against what we were just talking about a little while ago about a low-scoring game and two equally matched teams. So, I think the game is getting better. I think the girls are becoming more skilled, and of course, you have some athletes involved, and I think that, and I think you can have a chat. If there's an interest at your school where you have a coach that comes in and builds an interest, you can develop a program that has been down. It just takes a while, but a program that's been down that all of a sudden is up on top because they've kind of got it going after working at it, so that's definitely possible. It's fun to see that happen. It's good for the game. And I know when I first started coaching 100 years ago, there'd be 5 or 6 really, really good teams. And now there can be 5 or 6 really good teams in one district. I mean, there's just more and more teams that are capable of winning. Whereas when I first started coaching, there was, there'd be a couple that you would pick in each 1A, 2A, 3A, that sort of thing. But I think now I bet there's 10 that could probably win a state title, and not Class A, but about any other class other than Class A probably could win a title. So anyway, what Coach Ott's got to go through is not going to be easy. He's got a great team, but it's not going to be easy. They've got to prepare for every game, like you said, and you want to avoid that upset. You want to do what you do well, and hope that takes you through.
And before we get to Donnie to talk about 6A, Stephanie Desmarais is the head coach of Johnson. I got a chance to talk to her after the locker room, which, by the way, you can see that game wrap on my YouTube channel. I asked her, first off, she'd never heard of our show, so hopefully we'll recruit a new coach to come on and be able to watch us. But she also
needs to watch it.
But she also mentioned, I asked her, because it was on Valentine's night, which some people celebrate. I asked her, I said, is the win better than getting chocolate, candy, or flowers or something? And she said, absolutely. Well, she said a couple other words, but we'll leave it at absolutely. Donnie, I know 6A is you play a lot of those teams non-district classification. What are your thoughts about this side of the state? Because again, people forget that there is more to 6A than just Duncanville and DeSoto.
Yeah, Johnson and Wagner played them both this year, and I have a lot of respect for both coaches because their kids play absolutely outrageously hard, and they compete. We played Wagner the first game of the year, and it was a shootout 72. We had to score 72 to keep up with them. Sneed kid, she's as quick as it gets off the bounce, and then, Johnson, we played them at the McDonald's tournament, and it was a slugfest. And then their starting guard, who's an incredible shooter, Kylie Norman, she went down to a season-ending injury, and it was just heartbreaking. And honestly, at that point, Coach D and I did a lot of talking after that game, and it was tough for them to have to find a new identity almost and rebound after such a horrific injury to her. But their little point guard, number 3, that she's electric, and she's a leader. And so I'm not surprised. They're kind of playing on that, like I said earlier, that house money of just, let's go out there and play all we got. We lost one of our best players early in the year, but that don't mean we can't win. And she's got them believing. So that was a game that I was looking forward to watching to see who would win that. You know, Steele and Reagan. I haven't, you know, Tabor's a good friend of mine, you know, and I hated, you know, seeing that game because both of them are just solid people. I mean, Coach Chapman is, I mean, he's been a friend of mine for just years. And so those two teams, both those guys are incredible at what they do. And they both have phenomenal players. Sidney Love for Steele is an incredible guard. And, you know, Sammy over at Reagan, I mean, they're incredible talents. And, you know, Reagan lost one of their arguably best players at the beginning of the year to transfer. And so Reagan was almost not even thought of about doing things this year with just Sammy. But they collectively, you know, again, played well down the stretch and set up for a good first round game with Steele.
Yeah, and it will be interesting to see how that region plays out. It's the home region that I cover. San Antonio Clark beat Clemens by 36. I thought of it if maybe a year or two ago that would have been a barn burner, but most of the rest of the games were barn burners. You're gonna have some really good second round matchups. Clark will take on Vista Ridge, Johnson to get Round Rock, McNeil, the Austin High Maroons. I know, Donnie, that's a team that you're very high on. They beat Vandy by 16. They're going to play Brandeis in the second round. That I can't remember if that game is going to be part of the doubleheader with y'all and Edison, but that Austin Brandeis game, that will be a very interesting game to watch.
Yeah, that game's going to be a really good one. I am so it's so hard to pick a winner on that, you know, because Styles and that's going to be a great game, no question. I was actually hoping that was going to be on our doubleheader because I really wanted to, you know, get a chance to watch that. They'll have some talent on that floor. And that Clark game in Vista, you know, Keith over at Vista does a phenomenal job over there. They press, they get after it. And Clark's got some really good pieces. And so there's going to be some really good second round matchups in that 6A.
Yeah, definitely. We move on now to Class 4A, and this is obviously Joe's home classification, but I know, Donnie, you have a little bit to add in. Not a lot, I think, at least looking at the numbers, there was not a lot of surprises, although in Region 1, Canyon won by 58. Argyle won their game 85-9. Decatur won 86-4. So the Houston Rockets, San Antonio Spurs are now out of the tournament. But as we mentioned, we won't spend a lot of time on those top teams right now because we're assuming we'll see them get into the second round. But Joe, I do want to ask you about, and I think Donnie mentioned it earlier, when you're a heavy favorite in the first round, those first round games have to scare you because if anything else, even though you may win, you could potentially pick up an injury or potentially pick up a bad habit that could cost you later in the tournament.
Well, sometimes, you know, a team may come out because it's the playoffs, it feels a little different. They may come out a little nervous and just not play as well as they're capable of playing. And same thing, you know, Coach Ott, I'll see it even at a state tournament, the first time down at the Alamo Dome, sometimes teams don't play their best just because it's kind of overwhelming. And so when you start the playoffs, it can be a little bit of an overwhelming thing and just play a little tight. And so you hope to avoid that and get off to a good start and kind of get into your game. But yeah, there's lots of great games. I didn't see any big upsets in 4A. We talked a little bit about some of the favorites. You know, Argyle's just, you know, they're loaded. They've got 5 kids that can score, and actually, I think they've got 7 or 8 that can really score and have size. I think they're still the team to beat. Although I think Hardin Jefferson and Coach Ott made comment on those guys. I mean, they're going to be hungry. They've got basically everybody back from last year, Coach Ott, and I think they're very much in the mix.
I would agree with that. Yeah, and you know, what makes it tough on that is I believe La Vega and them are going to have to end up matching up. You know. And boy, I tell you, you know, La Vega is one of those, they're just like Hardin Jefferson. They just flat get after it, 94 feet, fly around. They got athletes, you know, and La Vega's young. So they've got that young, hungry, you know, mentality. Hardin Jefferson's been there, you know, like you said, got a heartbreak, want to come back and they're, you know, they got arguably one of the best players, you know, in the classification, you know, on their team. So, I mean, it's going to, that 4A, like you said, with Argyle and Canyon. I mean, this is going to be, yeah, that's going to be a fun one to watch, the state tournament as well.
Yeah, we
and
talked.
Canyon, we've got a tough road ahead of us. We've got team out of El Paso, San Elizario's got 2 6'2" post players, and then they've got a guard that averages 22 a game. So we have that in the second. We played them last year. They're very good. And then in our region, we've got several ranked in the top 15 or 20. And so every game from here on, I think is going to be really strong. Levelland is really good. And Argyle plays Stephenville this week. I think Stephenville's number 15. And Glen Rose and Decatur, that's a good Region 1, 14 versus 16 as far as their state ranking. So, but I think Region 2's really, it's wide open. There's 5 or 6 teams in Region 2. Midlothian Heritage, Kennedale, Sanger, Brownsboro, Sunnyvale. Those guys are all in the mix for a Region 2 4A championship. Of course, we've already talked about La Vega and Hardin Jefferson. Region 4, it's Bernie and Fredericksburg out of the same district. Looks like they both won easily. So
yeah, Fredericksburg's nice. I saw them earlier in the year. They've got a well-coached team, and their kids are very disciplined and smart. They play a good brand of basketball. It was fun to watch them earlier in the year. I had to scout a team, and they were playing them, and they got a good little bunch.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be interesting to see how San Elizario plays Canyon. I'm not saying San Eli's going to necessarily pull the upset, but that's a school that about 6-7 years ago was one of those that couldn't win in anything. Then their boys soccer started winning state championships. Their cross country team on the boys side won 4 in a row, and all of a sudden they became a dynasty, and they were winning more state championships as a school than San Antonio combined in all the sports. So that's always a fun school to keep an eye on. It'll be interesting to see how well they handle the pressure of Canyon. But I'll throw in one team down here in Region 4 to keep your eye on, and that is Somerset. Don't sleep on Somerset. They've got a lot of strength. They can pile up the points, and it'll be interesting to see what they do and seeing how they can handle things. And of course, Region 3, Hardin Jefferson won their opener by 68 points, if my Oklahoma math is correct. And they may not really see much in the way of strength until we get to the mid levels of the rounds. Donnie, I know you have to get going because you got to prepare for your second round matchup with Edison, and I know you always have to get out to the club and spin the tunes with 50 Cent and all those other ones. At least we learned Donny Ott is multi-talented, and Donnie, we appreciate you joining us, but we do have some gifts for you before we go because we don't want to be rude and not send our guests away without anything. We have.
This is great.
We have Joe's book that we'll make sure of it. And we also have Joe impersonating Dana Carvey right here on the. We've got that. We've got a busted battery that will not work on anything. We want to send you that so that way at least you have a token. And of course, we can't forget, but we're going to send you a warm, delicious bowl of Babs Lombard's famous tortilla soups. We want you to enjoy that, and we appreciate you stopping by. And I'll probably see you in round number 3 coming up early next week.
I'll take you up on that book, man, because when the season ends, that's my first thing I want to do, because I've had a lot of colleagues that have just raved about that book and cannot say enough good things about what it's done for them as a mentorship and so forth. So I'm really excited about reading it, and I do want to dive into that. And I just want to thank you guys so much for taking the time. It just is official now. We'll play tomorrow at 6:30. We're the only game. They're not going to do a doubleheader. So, but again, I want to tell you guys, thank you for having me on. It was a good time, and I really enjoyed it. And I look forward to listening to you both down the road.
Hey, best of luck, Coach Ott. We'll be following you all the way. So wish you nothing but the best.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, and
take care, sir.
Yeah, and it's definitely going to be fun to see how those matchups play out. Tomorrow night is Thursday night, in case you catch us on Thursday. By the way, it was a choice. It was either the Joe Lombard book or Dan Orlovsky's greatest accomplishments in NFL history. Appreciate Donnie joining us, and if we're hoping we're not going to get the Manning brothers curse bit, but it hasn't. Where coaches come on and lose, but we haven't had that happen because Canyon hasn't lost a playoff game since we started doing this last year.
Well, I hope it's good luck for the Lady Eagles. But yeah, Dan Orlovsky, yeah, he's a great commentator.
Yeah,
I
let's
think
okay. I'm going to cut you off right there. We're going to stop that right there. But let's move on to Class 3A, and we had 4 unbeatens, including Cedar Park at the start of the tournament. One of them did not get out of the first round. Karnes City, which is on the other side of Falls City on Highway 181, about 65 miles southeast of San Antonio. Really good football. Karnes City upset 33-0 Columbus 45-41 in the first round, and I don't have all the info on the game and what happened. But Joe, that's the old saying we talked about at the start, that everybody's unbeaten when you get to the start of the tournament, and you can't win the state championship in the first round, but you can lose it in the first round.
Sure
And Columbus is out of the draw.
You sure can. And I think one thing that helps prevent that a little bit is play a tough schedule. Because once you go through some really tough competition in your non-district, I think that helps when you finally get to the playoffs and you run into those really good teams. Hey, I've seen this before. This is what we need to do. Instead of it being oh my goodness, we're in a mess here. Well, we're not playing well. We're playing against a good team, and things can happen. So especially if the game is close, at the end of a game, anything can happen, good or bad. It could be a referee's call. It could be the ball goes in, comes out. So I feel for Columbus. They had a great year, but I know it hurts to lose that last game.
Yeah, especially when you go in unbeaten, and everybody always wonders, are you a solid unbeaten like Cedar Park we had just with Donny Ott, or is that not quite as strong? And I don't know what their schedule was, but I do know Karnes City was not a field filler. I think they had 25, 28 wins this year, so they certainly were not a team that was below 500 or just above it. So certainly earned their place there. Well, in your home region, region number 1, we had the mix of the really close games, Coahoma beating Ballinger by 2, Brock going to overtime against Bowie. That probably was a really great game to see, even on paper beforehand. But then we get Brownfield winning their close game. They only won by 92 points, but that kind of gives you that mix of first round games are going to be competitive and some that unfortunately are mismatches right out of the gate.
Yes, and I tell you, I think in Region 1, the top game that's coming up in the area round is going to be Brownfield versus Idalou. Brownfield is your defending state champion, currently ranked 3rd. Idalou they're ranked 8th, but Idalou lost to Brownfield last year. Controversial finish. Idalou was ahead in the game. They called a foul, I think, on a 3-point shot. Brownfield made the free throws to win the game with time expired. And then Brownfield went on to win the state title. That was in the second round game. So those same 2 teams are matching up again, Brownfield and Idalou. I think that's the game of this weekend as far as in Region 1 in any classification. So I'm looking forward to see how that game goes, and it's going to be a great one, I know.
Yeah, and to show you how stacked that Region 1 is, you're wondering why those teams are playing right away. Idalou was a non-district champion, Shallowater the district champion, so that's why you have these matchups right away. And Joe, this is literally where you kind of feel like you almost just want to wonder if this is where the state championship's going to be determined. There's obviously still there's still 64 left in the draw, but you kind of wonder with all these teams stacked here, is it going to be a case of whoever survives wins the title, or is whoever survives going to be at a disadvantage because they'll have gone through the tunnel?
Well, in the 3A classification of Region 1, just 6 of the top 10 or 5 of the top 8 are all Region 1. It's loaded, and the defending state champion Brownfield, who has all 5 starters back, they may not even be the favorite. So it's a great region, and look forward to seeing how that all turns out, because you have so many good teams, and they're going to be stacked up, already playing each other now in the area around. So I just wanted to mention that because I'm looking forward to that 3A region. Now in the other regions, everybody won. Ponder is out of Region 2, Ponder and Winsboro. Those are both very good teams. We talked about Fairfield the last time out of Region 3 in 3A, and Fairfield's got a great shot at winning the whole thing. They're very athletic, and I think they're going to be. They'll have to beat Lorena and Franklin in that region, but I really like Fairfield. And Region 4, you got what, Cole? You got San Antonio, Cole, and Bishop. Maybe I think Bishop might have made it a long way last year. So no upsets or anything, but some great games getting ready to happen.
Well, potentially other than that Karnes City game, which Karnes City will take on Blanco in the second round. Blanco beat Randolph. You mentioned Cole. I'm glad you brought it up. There's going to be a very intriguing second round game between San Antonio Cole, which is better known for their boys, taking on Poth, which is better known for their volleyball. But both of those teams have been to the state semis in the Alamo Dome era. That'll be a very interesting matchup, and potentially with Columbus out of the draw, and there's not a ton of strength in that region. Aransas Pass won their game by 53, and Bishop, you mentioned as well, a winner. This one, you have regions 1, region 4, where you have so many good teams in region 1 that it's going to be fun to watch. Region 4 doesn't have the high-end quality, but those teams are so closer. Those regions are going to be fun to watch for different reasons.
Yeah, you may have there could be several different teams have a great chance to come out of that region 4. So yeah, that's fun to watch and see who gets hot at the right time. And you get some momentum going, Greg, in the playoffs. That confidence thing is huge. So look for that to happen with a lot of these winning teams.
Yeah, absolutely. Move on to Class 2A and mention really not, it was almost status quo, so to speak. Groover was trying to go undefeated as well. They beat Memphis by 74. I don't know if that was Memphis High or the Memphis women's basketball team, though I'm pretty sure Groover would probably take them to school as well. I'm trying to scan over some of the results real quickly. Lipan, they won by 58. They're defending state champions. Martins Mill, I believe they took care of business as well. Munster won. So it's really kind of status quo. Refugio beat Fremont in overtime. Fremont restarted their athletics program not all that long ago. Shiner beat Holland. Goldthwaite beat Falls City by 6. Mason, who's been in the semis in recent times, they won pretty comfortably. So again, this is almost like status quo, move on, so to speak.
Yeah, I think so. I think I noticed Lipan's next game was with Anson in Region 2, and I think Anson's had a good year. I think they're a pretty good team. So, but status quo, and there's some great games yet to happen in 2A. So I'm still picking Groover to win it all. I think they're very talented, very well coached, and probably have the best player in the Maupin kid in the state of Texas in 2A. That's going to go to Texas Tech. So I think they're the team to beat.
I think they won it 2 years ago. And if I remember correctly, I saw their send-off when they had it on social media. And I mean, that was a heck of a send-off. They had the drone, they had the caravan. It was kind of like watching one of those old Western films.
Horseback riders.
Horseback riding. I mean, that was so much fun to watch that. And obviously getting a chance to cover them when they won the state championship. Groover has had a lot of success on the boys' side. Jalen Conyers, who won some titles in football there. Groover lost in the finals on the boys' side. And then the next year got wiped out because of the virus. I'm trying to look through, trying to see storylines. No, Douglas won by 41. There's really just, you want to mention all the teams in there. Obviously, there's too many to mention at this point, but it was almost status quo, and a lot of it's probably going to play out up there in your area, Joe, where again, just like in 3A, where it's probably going to be whoever survives that, if they aren't banged up too heavily, will be the favorite. Of course, Lipan, the titleist last year when they went up from 1A to 2. And I do want to ask you briefly, Joe, something we didn't get on our playoff preview earlier in the tournament, was Lipan didn't look like the class up affected them, even though they picked up a lot more powers. I mean, why is that?
Well, in girls basketball, you just play 5 players. And so if you've got that right combination, many times the small schools can compete with the big schools. And I think I mentioned last week, we've played Nazareth, we beat Nazareth. We lost to Groover, a 2A team, lost to Gymnet, a 3A team. But we are right in the game with Amarillo High and Lubbock, played them fairly close. So if you're good in girls basketball, you still can sometimes win at any level, although not as easy as it used to be. But man, I tell you, they can make some noise in 4 or 5A. I mean, they're that good. So anyway, with Lipan moving up, they've got a good tradition going there at Lipan, and obviously they must be growing the numbers, and so their enrollment has allowed them to kind of stay up with the next classification. So yeah, they'll be. I saw them play earlier, and they're really good. Munster. I don't know if we mentioned Munster. Munster's a good team out of Region 2. In Region 3, I also down La Pointer has made some noise the last few years. Region 4, I also mentioned San Saba to go along with Mason as a team that traditionally is pretty strong. So, but Region 1, you've got besides Groover, you've got Panhandle and Wellington and New Home. Sudan is good. You have several teams probably ranked in the top 10 or 12 right there in Region 1. So it's very good with Groover being the best.
Yeah, and what's interesting to mention about Lipan going up is Lipan does not play football, so you don't have the extra football players that come in, and the cap for the cutoff between 1A and 2A athletics, it used to be 99.5. I have no idea how the UIL gets the half. I'm sure we'll probably have to ask Charles Bright up how you get half a person, but the cap has gone up in recent realignments to 104.5, 105.5. So those non-football playing schools, you're picking up a lot of. It's interesting when they're going up from 1A to 2A that the non-charter schools that have to play up because of UIL rules, but that'll be something to see if Lipan can get through again and see if they win the title. Well, let's move on. Go ahead, Joe.
Well, it wouldn't surprise me if they don't make it to the state tournament again, Lipan. So they'll be in the mix for sure.
Move on to our final classification, Class 1A, and it's going to sound like a broken record that Donny Ott was spinning earlier, where not much happened that wasn't expected. Sands and Nazareth, who would play in the 4th round, they won their games by a combined 138-17. And I mentioned on our first round preview that was an area that I used to cover a lot. And just to prove that I'm not lying like a politician, that is the Sands Mustangs hat right there, found it in the closet. Now, we're a nonpartisan here, so I will not put it on. Plus,
I think their school colors are brown. Is that?
Yeah, it's one of the few schools I know in the state that has brown as a primary color.
Yeah.
And it's actually a consolidated district because there are about 3 or 4 other small districts on the northern part of Howard County, southern part of the Lamesa area where they consolidated. We mentioned Nazareth and Sands. One of the topics coming in that we discussed, Joe, was how the addition of the 4th playoff team in 1A for each district would affect things. Not much happened. 30 wins, only 2 losses. Balmorhea and Iredell were the ones that went down. Trying to look through real quick to see Marathon, who is one of the smallest high schools in the state of Texas, 1976 6-man state champions by Vance Jones back in the day. Marathon beat Balmorhea, and we mentioned Iredell. They lost to Gordon. So I guess you can call them Flash Gordon, so to speak. So really, it didn't seem like it affected too many teams. Those teams that had to play in the first round that would have had to bye, and maybe it's going to make them more dangerous because they didn't have the long layoff.
Yeah, I could in Class A, where I can't see that being a major thing as far as obstacles to get through. I tell you, talking about Region 1 again, Nazareth plays Claude this next game. And going into the season, Claude was one of the top 3 teams in this region. They did have an injury. And so I think they finished 2nd in their district behind Valley. Valley has a good team in Region 1. And so Nazareth and Claude this weekend will be a good test for Naz. I've heard a lot about Huckabee in Region 3, and so I'm anxious to see how they do. I'm kind of keeping up with them. Robert Lee in Region 2, very best. Remember, very best been at the state tournament 2 years ago. They'll make some noise in Region 2. Impressive in Region 4 was Netchus. They had a big win, so they may be one of those teams that may make some noise in Region 4 in Class A. But I sure like the Nazareth Sands thing as eventual state champion.
Yeah, and that's a potential fourth round matchup, which we'll touch on them as we get down the road. You mentioned Netchus. Netchus is probably angry because they lost their chance at a four-peat in volleyball this past year. They beat Goodrich 89-15. I don't know. So Goodrich, the tire company, BF Goodrich did not do that great, but we know Goodrich always one of those great small towns. I want to mention Tilden McMullen County. I do want to tell you that we do have the folks in Tilden that do watch us. Shannon Taylor, who's the AD and also the girls basketball coach in a non-football playing school. He watched us. He loved the comparison to the Cincinnati Bengals, even though the Bengals gagged in the final minutes of the championship game on Sunday. They will take on Bartlett. And we mentioned that there's teams that you always pick out for different reasons and how McMullen County just never can make that long playoff run. They'll take on Bartlett in the second round. Bartlett out of the Austin area. McMullen County is about 90 miles south of San Antonio. Bartlett's most famous alum, at least one of those, is Claude Mathis, the football coach at DeSoto High. He won a state championship there in baseball about 30 years ago. So that it'll be interesting to see what McMullen County is able to do. Coolidge won in a blowout. Fayetteville, who's trying to do the unusual three-peat where they won the baseball state championship, won a volleyball state championship. They're off to a good start in girls basketball. Fayetteville is a non-football playing school, but their AD Clint Yeager became the first to pull off the unusual volleyball and baseball state championships in the same calendar year. There's not many volleyball coaches that coach baseball or the other way around. So that's what's always fun, Joe. If anything else, is you always get those unique storylines that you can't find in 6A. You find them in Class 1A.
Oh yeah. Since you've mentioned McMullen, I'm going to keep an eye on it. I'm going to be pulling for McMullen and wish them the best of luck, because love to see them make a great run, and glad they're watching your show.
I love that take a charge sweater. I'm Joe Lombard, who had 4 undefeated seasons in his career. By the way, Babs did send me a note. We'll pass along to Donny that the soup's on its way. And she mentioned that, yes, you had 4 unbeaten seasons in your career, but I've heard that she's still unbeaten against you.
No. It's the other way.
No, I said she's unbeaten against you.
Okay.
Joe, you'd be winless right now.
We did play each other when we both, my first year of coaching, Babs was head coach at Hill Center, and Nazareth and Hill Center met in the Crest semifinals of their tournament. We won Naz won 33-32. Stories in that book, by the way, Greg, but I got home that night, and there was a doghouse in the front yard that said "Happy Sleeping Joe" on the doghouse. And so that was not a popular win, with us winning by 1. And so I thought I was going to have to sleep in the doghouse, but she finally let me in. I think it was after midnight. And but anyway, she was a great coach, and but we did have one encounter where we played against each other.
Joe, we're going to rehash
state titles. We both won state titles that year.
Joe, we're going to rehash that story later in the tournament near the top, because I'm sure a lot of people that maybe did not hang around for the whole show, they're going to want to hear that story. Well, Joe, we always appreciate it. It'll be interesting when we get to the third round, which is where a lot of people think that the tournament really begins. We'll talk about the third round then. But Joe, want to say thanks so much again for joining us, and we'll talk about round number 3 with you. We'll talk about it. We'll get that taped in time so everybody that's still playing can check out the show. Joe, thanks for the time as always.
Sounds great. Had a great time. Thanks for having me.
Want to thank Joe. Want to thank Donny Ott. And again, don't forget to pick up the book, More Than a Coach. Joe might have a few copies on him when he's down at the state tournament, the state semis and finals, either if Canyon makes it or for one of the 900 honor teams that Joe has. We're out of time. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll check back for round number 2 recaps and round number 3 preview. So long, and enjoy the tournament.